Welcome to the Fusion Power Podcast. My name is Jared Gillespie. I am the Chief Sales Officer at Fusion Power. We're on site here at an Airbnb where we just filmed a sales presentation for our training platform. And I wanted to do a podcast here. This presentation was kind of geared towards SRP customers. And it got me thinking about SRP and how to present solar in SRP. And the fact that we have a lot of solar professionals in the state of Arizona selling in this utility that can be very, very beneficial or very, very harmful for customers. So I want to make sure that if you're new to the area, or even if you've been doing solar for a long time, you understand very clearly how to sell solar, what its benefits are and what its risks are if you're selling an SRP, okay? So I started solar back in 2013. And back then, SRP was a net metering utility. If you don't know what that means that every time you put a kilowatt hour back on the grid when you overproduce, right, when you're making more power than what you're actually consuming, that kilowatt hour would store in a bank and you could use it whenever you want. And so literally what that meant is if I gave you 100% offset, it would offset 100% of your bill and you'd have a $0 utility bill. Well, you can imagine that the utility company didn't like that. And so at the end of 2014, they got rid of net metering and forced everybody to go on a different rate plan that until the last few years, nobody really knew how to utilize with solar, and it just kind of killed solar as an industry for a while here in the state of Arizona. We'll talk more about that rate plan and actually how advantageous it really is now that the proper technology is available. But there's three different rate plans in Arizona in the SRP territory. Okay, number one is your basic plan. Most people know about this. You're going to have a tiered usage, and that's going to be on average about 13 cents per kilowatt hour, okay? That is a rate plan that probably 30 to 40% of your customers are already going to be on. Then you have time of use. Time of use runs between 2 p.m. to 8 p.m., and your on-peak rates between 2 o'clock and 8 o'clock are going to be much more expensive than your off-peak rates. The idea there is they want to dissuade people from using a lot of power in the afternoon just because of the demand and the pressure that puts on the grid. So they charge you anywhere between 23 and 26 cents per kilowatt hour in the afternoon during those high demand hours. And then they charge you 10 cents a kilowatt hour, 9.5 cents a kilowatt hour during those off-peak hours. Then they have a rate plan called the EZ3 program. The EZ3 goes from 3 to 6 or 4 to 7. You get to choose a time frame where your on-peak hours are going to be anywhere between 31 cents to 36 cents a kilowatt hour. Very, very expensive power for those 3 hours. And then it's 10 cents a kilowatt hour during the off-peak hours. Okay, so depending how a customer manages their energy, if they can avoid using a lot of power during those peak hours, theoretically they can buy their power, the majority of their power anyway, around 9 or 10 cents and try to see some savings. Now, when you go solar though, you can't stay on any of those rate plans. You have to go to a new rate plan. What we recommend is the E27 program. The E27 plan is a huge reduction in kilowatt hour costs, okay? You're gonna have your on-peak rates at 7 cents a kilowatt hour and your off-peak rates at 6 cents a kilowatt hour. So if I was on EZ3 spending 36 cents and now I'm dropping down to 7 cents, I'm reducing my power cost during those on-peak hours by 6x. We're talking about a 50 to 85% reduction in those rates. It's a very, very good way to save a lot of money. So the question is, well, why doesn't everybody go on this rate plan? Well, there's another component to the E27 plan, and that's called your demand charges. Now, what a demand charge is, SRP is going to take the 30-minute window during the month that you happen to use the most power. That could happen at 6 p.m. on a Friday night. It could happen at 4 p.m. on a Thursday afternoon. You don't know when it is, but it just happens to be when that house is drawing the most power over a given 30-minute period. And depending on how many kilowatts are drawn in that 30-minute period, randomly throughout the month, you're going to have a demand charge per kilowatt. So your first 3 kilowatts is $8 a kilowatt. Your next 4 to 11 is 14 a kilowatt. And then your next 12, anything over 12, is $27 per kilowatt of energy that you use. Okay? So while you're cutting your rates, your kilowatt hour rates by 50 to 85%, that demand charge could bring you way back up to where you previously were, right? Consider 6 o'clock on a Wednesday evening, you have both AC units kick on, you've got your water heater kicking on, you've got the refrigerator running at cycle, and whatever else is going on in the house, and you have a 10 or 12 kilowatt demand. Well, that 12 kilowatt demand would be $150 charge on top of your kilowatt hour usage. So although you would have saved on lower cost per energy, your demand charge takes you right back up, or maybe even worse than where you were. Okay. Now, how does that apply to solar? What do we try to do? How can you take advantage of that rate plan and mitigate that demand charge? That's where solar comes in, right? And so there's different ways that you can mitigate a demand charge. Number one is something called a load controller, or a DMS, a demand management system. What that does is you hook it up to your panel, and when it senses that you're using a certain amount of energy, it's going to systematically turn off prioritized devices to keep the demand low. So for example, if I set my load controller at 6 kilowatts, if I'm trying to draw more than 6 kilowatts, or my AC unit's trying to draw more power that would take me above 6 kilowatts, it's going to automatically turn that AC unit off until my demand drops, and it's going to keep it capped. And so that way you can kind of control at least what your demand is. You wouldn't have out of control demand charges, but you would have at least a capped demand charge. So if I went on the E27 program, I could get really, really low price per kilowatt hour, and then I could have a controlled set capped demand charge, say of 60 or 70 bucks, and that's going to save me a lot of money every month comparative to what I was paying before. So that's one thing you can do. Number two is solar. Solar is a great way to control and get rid of demand while the sun is shining. Okay, as long as the sun is up, the solar is producing, and now I'm replacing the energy that I would have otherwise bought from SRP. Therefore, my kilowatt hour usage is gone and my demand is gone. The problem is, once the sun goes down, the solar is no longer producing, yet that demand window still goes until 8 p.m. So if I'm talking about, say, August, and the sun is going down at 6:30 p.m., well, I've got from 6:30 to 8 where I'm still in demand window. I could have that same scenario take place where I have both AC units kick on because it's still hotter than blazes. I've got my water heater and I've got my refrigerator running a cycle, and I hit a 12 kilowatt demand. Well, great. The solar kept me at a zero demand all day long until the sun went down, and now boom, I just had this $150 demand charge for that 30-minute window sometime between 6:30 and 8 p.m. Okay, so now here's where it gets really dangerous. I had a low cost of energy for the off-peak usage that I'm buying from SRP. I have a monster utility demand charge, and then I have my solar bill on top of that. Those three combined could end up being far more than what I was paying to SRP in the first place. And this is the biggest complaint we get from customers when they call in. They say, hey, my sales rep said that I was supposed to see a $0 bill, or I was going to save money going solar, right? Anybody that tells you you're going to have a $0 bill, by the way, if you've been trained that you'll give your customer a $0 bill in SRP, it's impossible. You can't, okay? It's not possible. They have a $30 connection fee. You can't do it. The sun does not produce at nighttime, or the solar panels do not produce at nighttime. You cannot get rid of their total usage. However, a lot of reps do think that as long as I have solar, it's going to get them through the demand hours, and they're not going to have a demand charge. That is false. Again, while the sun goes down, during peak hours, you're still going to incur those demand charges. And so customers will call up with this big bill, and we have to explain to them, the solar did exactly what it was supposed to do. It produced all the energy that it was supposed to while the sun was shining. However, these demand charges are taking place after the sun's gone down. And the customers, well, that's not what he told me. I was supposed to save money, and it's a frustrating thing, okay? So that leads us into number 3. And this is probably the best solution of all, would be battery storage. A battery can be programmed to discharge all throughout those peak hours and cover what you would have otherwise bought from the utility. However, the reason that this is better than a load controller, for example, is that it could, if you have enough battery storage, cover all of your demand usage, leaving you with zero demand requirements, and then the only thing you're buying from SRP is off-peak power at their 4, 5, 6, 7 rate, depending on the season, whatever it is. Very, very cheap power. So the question is, how much battery do I need in order to be able to cover the on-peak power? This is where you as a professional need to take a look at their bill, get into their account, and figure out how much on-peak usage does this customer have between 2 and 8. however many kilowatt hours that is on a daily basis, you need to be able to provide that much battery storage to replace that energy. And then they can, again, buy their off-peak power super low, charge the battery in the middle of the night at that super low rate, and then discharge it during that programmed time of use, during that programmed on-peak hours, to get rid of their on-peak usage and demand, their demand, okay? And so batteries by themselves actually are the best way that you can provide somebody savings in SRP on the E27 plan. Now the fourth combo, because we all sell solar as well, is to do a PV plus battery combo. What's cool about this is two things. Number one is you could have your solar mitigate the demand in the afternoon, and then you have your battery come in and mitigate and reduce and get rid of demand once the solar stop producing. So those two together make a perfect sandwich. And what's really cool about that application is it allows you, if the grid were to go down, to be able to be to be off grid, so to speak, and be complete self-reliant. Run off the battery, recharge the battery with solar. The first scenario, if you only have batteries, they can only charge as long as the grid is working. And luckily, the grid is very reliable here in SRP, so that is a possible good solution. But if the grid goes down, that battery drains and it doesn't do you any good anyway. So to charge the battery with the solar is another cool solution. So we really like number 4, solar plus battery. It allows you to, you could do 2 batteries or solar plus battery. The cost on that contract is going to be same to the customer. The benefit is going to be a little bit higher with option number 4, simply again because they would have that backup option. Doing a 50% offset with a battery would be the same cost as 100% offset, but actually do twice the damage to the bill, right? Because we're getting rid of those demand charges. So how do you explain all this to a customer? That's a lot of talking, okay? Here's one example of a way that you could possibly do this. Go ahead and take a listen to this. Okay, so Thomas, we're talking about how there's not a lot we can do considering the population growth and the extra energy stress on the grid, and the energy expansion that the utilities have to make. Inevitably, our bills are going to keep going up, right? We've been talking about this. So what I want to bring up here now is the solution to this problem, because it's no fun talking about a problem unless we can come up with a solution, right? Right. So you guys have been on this time of use plan forever right now. Have you ever looked at the rates, how you guys are actually getting billed? Do you know how that kind of works?
I have, but I haven't really looked into it too much.
Okay. So on peak, you guys, and that's between the hours of 2 o'clock to 8 o'clock. Do you guys follow the rules very well, by the way?
I just kind of use my power
whenever. Okay. That's how most people are. So what you should understand, and the reason that your bills are so high is because between 2 to 8, you're spending about 24 cents per kilowatt hour.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Now, after 8, all the way around the clock until 2 o'clock the next afternoon, you're only getting charged about 9.5 cents. Okay. So SRP would prefer that you use power during the non-demand time of use. You're going to have a much smaller bill. The problem is between 2 and 8, it's the hottest part of the day. We need to have our ACs running. Right. And so we use as much power as we need, and it just costs us a ton of money. And so the solution to this is a new rate plan. It works the same way. You have time of use between 2 and 8, but on the new rates, and this is called the E27 plan, okay. On the new rates, you only have to spend 8 cents per kilowatt hour during the peak hours, and only 6 cents per kilowatt hour during the off-peak hours. Okay, so you're dropping down from that 24 to 26 cent range in the on-peak hours, all the way down to 8 cents in those on-peak hours, right? So we're talking, what is that, a 60-70% discounted rate of what you guys would currently be spending.
Right.
And then in the off-peak, you're going from 9.5 cents down to 6 cents. That's another 30%. So what would that do to your bill by switching to that rate plan?
Yeah, drastically less.
Huge, right? So everybody's like, well, why would I not just switch that rate plan? Well, here's the sneaky part, right? SRP is still going to make their money. So they add another component on this called a demand charge. And what a demand charge is they basically look at all of your entire month, and they try to find the 30-minute period during the peak hours throughout the entire month that you happen to use the most power. You don't know when that is because none of us are monitoring our energy like that, right?
Right.
But it would have been a time when both of your AC units kicked on. Maybe the kids turned the slide on the pool back that I can see you guys got, and maybe the refrigerator was running its cycle, and all of a sudden you spiked. Well, that demand charge, depending on how high the demand is, it could range anywhere between $60 to $160.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So even though you might be getting really, really cheap power per unit, if you have a huge demand charge, it completely negates all the savings that you would have had.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So what we want to do as an energy company is how do we get you to be able to buy the cheap power and at the same time make sure that you don't end up having to have a big demand charge. Okay. So there's a couple ways that we do that. Number one, and this is the best thing that we can put out there, is with battery storage. Okay. And this is how it works. It's really, really awesome. You've heard of like power walls or Generac batteries, right? Or generators, right?
Okay.
What happens is we put this awesome storage facility. It goes in your garage or on the side of the house over there. And what we do is we have it programmed to charge in the middle of the night at that cheap off-peak rate of 6 cents a kilowatt hour.
Right.
Okay. Then we program it to discharge in the afternoon between 2 and 8 so that all of the energy you're getting is coming rather from the grid, you're getting it straight from your battery. Okay. So now you're avoiding both the kilowatt hours as well as the demand charge, and that effectively takes you down from, again, 26 cents a kilowatt hour down to 6 cents a kilowatt hour day in, day out, year round.
Okay, yeah,
Okay.
that makes sense.
Do you see what that's doing there? So your bill goes, what was the high bill again?
About $285.
Okay,
Like
I mean, you guys are up there, right? That's actually a little bit cheaper than most people. But that $285 bill, you take that down by 60, 70%, you're down to whatever that is, a $60 bill plus your connection fee. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So you're saving like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars a year by switching this rate plan. The cool thing about the batteries is that not only do they give you the help you to reduce the bill, but also gives you backup power as well. So if the power goes out, you'd still be able to run off of your battery for several hours, keeping your refrigerator up and running, keeping your lights on until the power is restored after one of our monsoons.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
So
that makes sense.
it's a really, really cool product a lot of people like. And they're not that expensive too. They're cheaper than what you'd expect. Most generators that cost $25,000, $30,000, whatever. A battery like this for your house, you'd probably end up spending anywhere between $15,000 to $25,000, depending on how much battery storage that we need. Okay. And so over time, I mean, your savings pays for that very, very quickly, and you guys end up just laughing your way to the bank with all the savings you're getting compared to that $285 bill that we just talked about,
right,
where it's going to be up to $300 and then $350 the next year after that. Blah, 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 blah. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Now, and then if you finance it, well, first of all, the really cool thing about it is that you get a 30% discount on the battery. And so whatever, we'll do some math here to show you how much storage you'd need. But 30% of that is actually qualifies for a tax credit.
Oh,
and so
great.
that'll
Okay.
just be paid for you.
Oh, yeah. That's awesome.
Now, there's another cool thing that a lot of people really like, and this is what I'm going to suggest. You don't have to do this, but I highly suggest this, is to add a solar array up on your roof as well.
Okay.
And this is why. If we put solar up on the roof, not only can that help reduce your demand during the afternoon, now that means that the solar would be producing all afternoon, replacing any energy that you would have otherwise bought from SRP or from the grid. And then once the sun goes down and the solar stops producing, the battery turns on, and now you only have to use that battery for a couple hours and keep it full as you're going into the nighttime.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So now you're supplementing with both. And the really cool thing about solar is if the power were to go out for days at a time, we never deal with this here in Arizona, but it happened in Texas twice in the last couple of years with those storms. Let's say that something like that happened though, you would actually be able to run off of your solar and charge your battery, and effectively you're off grid at that point. You'd be able to keep electricity in your house while everybody else is just hoping that the power eventually comes back on.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, that'd be a
So
blessing.
if you guys are kind of preppers or whatever, this is a really, really cool setup. When you look around and you see everybody who's getting solar lately, most people are doing solar with a battery like I've described, because that's kind of the ultimate, that's kind of the ultimate combination. And now where the pricing is now, doing a solar system with a battery, that the way that we have our pricing set up now, it's about the same rate as you used to have to pay for a solar system even 3-5 years ago.
Gotcha. Okay.
So it works out really, really well. But your monthly payment on that's going to be it'll be somewhere close to what you're paying right now for SRP. Mm-hmm. But again, as SRP keeps going up, you stay the same. Your savings just grows and grows and grows and grows. And then once you have it paid off, your savings goes exponential at that point. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
What questions would you have on something like that? So as you can see, that can be a little bit tricky to explain, but it has to be explained. Guys, again, we get so many complaints from customers not understanding what a demand charge is. And I get it. I'm in sales. You don't want to have to get into the nitty gritty. You try to simplify it and just say, this solar system is going to save you a whole bunch of money. You're going to have a little bit of other charges, but overall, this is going to save you money. And you leave it at that. Guys, that's not honest enough. It's not transparent. If a customer doesn't understand the risk of those demand charges, they will end up spending more than what they spent before. They cannot have a $0 bill. They cannot have a $30 connection fee, and that's the only thing that they pay. It simply doesn't work that way, okay? So do things the right way and make sure that you're explaining how demand charges work and that our products actually allow them to get rid of those demand charges and save the customer money and giving them a long-term savings, short-term and long-term savings, and giving them a sustainable way of providing their own power. Hopefully that helps. Hopefully you've been receiving this kind of training. If you haven't, go back and listen to this again. Make sure that you're being honest and transparent with your customers, and let's serve them and treat them the way that we want our own parents or our own family members to be treated if they were buying a solar system here in the SRP area. You guys have a great day. Make it a good one.